Welcome to the World Builders Anvil, episode 267. Today's topic, Jeff is a world builder no more.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java and build.
Welcome back. As always, my name is Jeffrey W. Ingram, the not world builder.
And confused and maybe saddened, I am Michael Miller. What do you mean you're not a world builder?
It's just one of those things, where in the last episode we talked about it and, getting over being sick. You spend a lot of time online reading about the things you love and world building, Reddit world and, which maybe I just shouldn't go to. I mean, there's really smart people in Reddit. Don't get me wrong. I want people to take it the wrong way, but, it's not just Reddit. It's on Twitter. It's in Facebook. I read all the stuff where people they're so stuck on, the world building side of things. And when you read their questions, they get stuck on this idea of, the science, it's not realistic enough. I need to work more on my binomes in my world, or the plate tectonics. I really need to figure out the plate tectonics so I can get good mountain ranges set up and all of this stuff. And, it's this idea where the world builder, becomes like the nameless, universal force, that creates a realistic realm. But then with an irony is then it has magic and or faster than light space travel, which, according to current science, you can't travel faster than light. So that's outside of realistic, or magic, which is outside of realistic. But, if, your binomes aren't quite set up correctly, where your tundra might be slightly too close to a forested area, then your world is ruined for all of the people partaking in the story. And the great thing about being sick is sometimes you see the world in a different way. And the thing I saw, and I see a lot, and I think people take this where, when you read criticism sometimes about, either Game of Thrones or Westeros, the stuff that's out there, the big stuff that people are talking about, there's like maybe 1% of the people who are complaining about stuff like inaccurate science, especially in fantasy worlds. You see it a bit more in science fiction worlds, especially in books that claim to be hard science fiction. But, in fantasy worlds, you see it maybe 1% of the time. It's an extreme. And but you do see a lot where people are saying something about this world doesn't feel right, and they'll say it's not realistic. But usually when I read into their comments, they're talking about the way the characters are interacting. They don't agree with the characters and the way they move and act within the world. Sometimes it's the believability of a culture doing something, or it's like if you had a desert culture that worshiped the sun as a good god and spent all day out in the sun because that was the right thing to do, that would be questionable because they would probably all die because
I was about to say, yeah.
And this being like a equator desert.
Well, but you're also, I think, making one small assumption, saying, like assuming that they're human, like they could be
assuming that they're human. Yeah,
they could be a
lizard race probably do pretty good.
Yeah.
As long as it's not too hot, I mean, look at the Sahara. You have like lizards that skip really well, or snakes that slither with barely touching the ground because they can barely take the heat in the hottest part of the day. Now, obviously, a desert like Antarctica would have different problems for snakes, but I'm speaking more of a Sahara-style desert here. But usually, most of the time, it's not even stuff about that. It's really about the idea that you have Aragorn come back and that the king is needed to save the world. That's not realistic. Or the idea that the Game of Thrones never ends, but It's just this constant warfare that rages on. Humanity would wipe itself out 1,000 years before the Game of Thrones series started. And it's, I think, more stuff about how the characters interact in the world are typically where people get stuck on, because people speak about what they understand and can relate to. Most people don't have a great understanding of science, and even if they have I have a superficial understanding of lots of different types of sciences because of my world building. But even then, you get into hard science, I really don't. And I think I do, but I don't know as much as I think I do. And most people don't, unless you're really, and this is where the problem is, unless you're really like a PhD in the areas, right? And I know like Interstellar came out a few years ago, it was written by astrophysicist, a theoretical astrophysicist, and it was about theoretical astrophysics. So, okay, that makes sense. And so the stuff can work and it can still be good,
But didn't he even concede that there's a lot of it that's like totally, not true, or at the very least conjecture?
At the far, I think the way I heard him say it was at the far fringes of ideas. So I mean, it most definitely, like, some of it was based in what we know, but he was going into really far out there. I mean, you can't even call them theories. They're just, ideas at this point that people are throwing out there and maybe don't even know how to test. And that's the thing is, and a lot of times too, it's like, I remember when I first started world building, like solar systems back in the early 90s, I had the GURP Space Book, which was a wonderful book. And it had all of the math, so you could figure out where it followed all of the latest science. So you knew exactly where your solar systems were. And if you're doing a game, you sometimes need a bit more accuracy, with like the distance. If you have space travel, you really need to know what the distances are and stuff like that. But you could set up a good solar system with the proper orbits, and it would work. And the theory of how solar systems must be constructed. But since that time, it's radically changed because they've started seeing into other solar systems and realizing, sometimes there's like a gas giant in the same orbit as Mercury. That's completely different. I mean, they always thought all of the hard, rocky planets would be the inner orbits, and the bigger, gassy planets would be in the outer orbits. But then you have a thing like Pluto, which they have trouble even classifying, which I would say probably isn't a planet. I'm sorry, but that's just, me listening to much smarter people. So
obviously not Gary, because Gary thought Pluto was a planet.
Well, he was wrong.
And
that's the thing is, and a lot of times when you get caught up in this stuff, and I would definitely say if you have a PhD in geography, geology, astrophysics, physics, chemistry, evolution, geography, climate, linguistics, you don't have all of those PhDs. If you do have one of those PhDs, maybe you want to build a world that can show off your expertise. But most of the people who are doing this stuff have none of those things. Like if you're like me and you like to self-study, you go in and you have a lot of knowledge over a lot of different areas, but it's not specialized enough in any one area to be really good at it. I could never go and I could never pretend to be an astrophysicist.
Well, you could pretend. I mean,
I could ask questions and you're like, no, I disagree. And people might think I'm one.
I concur. Do you concur? Why didn't I concur?
Show me your data. And then they pull the data out. I'm like, I can't read this.
I can't. Well, no, then you just go, all right, doctor, I can't argue with this.
Well, this does look convincing since you have it to show me.
Professor. Yes, Professor.
Professor Doctor.
Professor Doctor. That's his last name. Professor Doctor. Doctor Professor.
And the thing is, the thing I really want to say is I think we need to be getting away from those ideas, and classic fantasy worlds never really did this. And I don't even see worlds like Westeros where they have a really strong foundation in geology in them. And if you like it and you want to learn about stuff, I have no issues with you putting this stuff in there. But, for me, when I'm world building, I sometimes do use stuff I'm learning and try and apply it, but that's off book. That has nothing to really do with things people interact with usually, unless I can test it out and it works. Because ultimately, you create a fictional world to share with people through a tabletop game, through a video game, through a novel, or through your pictures that you like to draw. Maybe you have a fantasy world, you draw pictures from your world, or you found a different way to do it. Those are all awesome. But the thing is, we have a reason for world building, and if it's stopping me from showing it to people and sharing it with people, I'm starting to use this idea that I don't have the PhD knowledge in geography, geology, climate science, astrophysics, physics, evolution, which is really most people, myself included, don't really understand even what the idea of the survival of the strongest even really means. We think the better, species should survive. I mean, we're really way off on this stuff usually. And the thing is, when it's BS, you're just guessing anyway, because a lot of times if you took two creatures that existed 100,000 years ago and ask most people, okay, here's this creature, here's how they worked, here's this creature, here's how they worked, which one survived this time period? You would probably get it wrong 95% of the time. Why? Because about 95% of the creatures are probably dead from that time. They're no longer with us. So, and a lot of times you look at the ones that survive, you're like, how? And it's really usually more the strong is really more in their ability to adapt. But once again, I'm getting into my own problem here of being a world builder. And so the thing is, we have to get back to this idea that we're creating a fictional setting for something. It's a presentation format. So it's like I say, it's like when you show that frame to someone, they look through it, they can see what kind of looks like a living, breathing world, but it's not, and so, but we do it with purpose. So it's a fictional setting that we're creating. We're doing it with purpose. These are the important things to keep in mind of what we're doing. And when things get in our way, we have to say, is it important for how we share it with someone? I can make a note and maybe learn more to put more in there if I want to later, but it doesn't have to stop me from moving forward to getting to where I want to go. And I hear, and I see this a lot with languages too. There's software now that you can go by. You can actually put in the sounds that you want, or you can sort of take a random selection they put together for you. I think you pay them like $10 one time, and you can get like a 4,000 word dictionary generated.
Of a different language?
Of a made up language. And, you can name it, you can tweak it to make it your own and say, okay, you can create a fictional language in under 10 minutes.
Wow.
And I have books, I have great books on creating. I've gone through the process. It's interesting from a learning perspective. And I do love the detail that the languages add in. You can really, I think, especially when people are reading and they're seeing names written down, you can tell that it's a different area just because the words change on a map, right? The way the ending is, or maybe the way the beginning is, the patterns change enough, and we recognize there's something different here, and we're not sure why. And unless the story or something goes into it, it lets people's imagination run with it. So you can get a lot of great detail, but there are tools now where you could probably go out there and get a solar system generator if you really want an accurate solar system. If you're struggling with the math, you can't figure out the math, you can figure out the math for a solar system. Isn't that hard? But it's probably not right. I think we're still learning a lot about how solar systems are constructed. The science there is probably too new. You can get stuff that's concurrent with what science is today, but it's going to be wrong tomorrow. And for most things science-based, that's true. A lot of these great science fiction guys that we think of, Arthur C. Clarke, comes to mind. The guy had a Fields Medal, I think, in physics and math, which means he was like the highest person who came out of his college in those two subjects for a year. He could have been a high-end PhD in those fields. So, it's easier for him to have very realistic science in his science fiction. If you don't have his background, it's going to be more difficult. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do science fiction, but, maybe hard science fiction isn't the right choice.
And I think the bigger point that's being made here is that you don't need to.
You don't need to, especially today. How many space operas are out there?
Less world building, more storytelling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's about the presentation to people. It's like I have no idea how realistic Firefly's science was, and I never cared. It never crossed my mind.
Yeah.
Same thing with Star Trek or Star Wars. I know some people Star Trek wise would kind of get into that a bit more. And there are people, especially science fiction wise, that worry about it. But especially if you're going fantasy side or something like steampunk or some variation like that, those should not be crossing your minds. It's create that fictional setting with a purpose. Our focus instead of the science should be the immersibility. Once people get a taste of it, what gets them to come back and get the second and the third and the fourth taste? What gets them thinking about and trying to expand upon it in their own time? That's the amazing thing is, the things that make the best worlds aren't the realism of the worlds, the believability of the worlds. It's the 9 kabillion fan theories you can find out whenever they release something. It's like how many fan theories are there on the next installment of Infinity War at this point? Endgame, I'm thinking they're calling it. Yeah, I don't know. There's probably 15 that come out, that get articles a day.
My feed gets loaded with Endgame stuff every single day. I delete every one of them because I don't want to read or know.
I'm with you. I don't want to know. And the other thing is, it's like Amazon's come out with the Lord of the Rings series, so they tease out a map of Middle Earth, and so all of the people who are huge into the Middle Earth lore start looking at the maps, and they have now a rough time frame, but they're pulling out all of the details, trying to figure out and get as close to, and they're trying to drive theories of just when this series is going to take place.
Yeah,
there's nothing realistic about the geography of Middle Earth. The cultures are just something kind of slammed in there because they're representative of stuff that he wanted to explore. It had nothing at all to do with, all science. For him, it was about the language and the exploration of English mythologies from the Saxons or the Vikings. The good and bad sides of England and English mythology. Through English mythology, through expanding it. And, so that was his purpose. I don't think he ever cared about what was the distribution of iron. I've seen people come out with spreadsheets so you can put in some figures and you should know roughly how many different types of different businesses your city should be. That kind of stuff I will geek out on, don't get me wrong. But, I'm the 1% who thinks that's cool. Most people will never look at that or care. Or you can have that on the side, but don't let it stop you from producing because, I don't know how many basket weavers my city of Iowa. I have no idea. I know there are basket weavers. I have no idea how many. I never will. If there will be taverns, I'll know the ones that are important to the stories, but not the rest of them. I don't care. And I think, and the way I'm saying is, this isn't the real world. It does not shift anything in the real world, your fictional setting. Care less about getting it to look realistic. You can make it believable without having it realistic. And sometimes if you make it realistic, it will not be believable. It's the idea of, facts are sometimes stranger than fiction, and oftentimes are. A lot of things that happen, if they were put into a plot of a movie and you watched it, you would walk away laughing. And then you go, oh, crap, that's actually based on a real story.
Yeah, like, oh, that actually happened.
I forget which one I watched recently where they took a real life story, they fictionalized it and made a movie about it. And it was about bodybuilders in Miami who got involved in Detroit.
Oh, yeah.
But like every 10 minutes of the movie, it was sort of the thing in the movie. They was like, no, this really happened. Like this scene we're playing out, this really happened. Just we want to make sure you understand that. And throughout the movie, they kept repeating that. I wish I remember the name of that movie. It was a really fun.
Yeah, it was Mark Wahlberg and The Rock.
Mark Wahlberg and The Rock. Yep.
Yeah, I know the name of it. I'm drawing a blank on it right now. It's bugging me because I don't think I finished that movie. I know I seem to remember starting it, but I didn't finish it.
Yeah, but it was a fun movie. It was a worthwhile watch, and they had to keep reminding you that it was real because it was ridiculous what was going on in there. And yeah, so the thing is. And remember too, believable is it's on the eye of the beholder, so most people, like I said, we see things in patterns. We think we know more details than we really do about things that we've seen, about things that we've read. We really remember patterns, and all people, this is the way our brains work unless they are photographic memories, which a very tiny percentage of the population has. And a lot of those people end up being overwhelmed because they have so much information that it causes other issues. So, don't, worry about the patterns and the way things feel. Don't get stuck on uber realism of things, and if you're not sure if something's believable or not, put it in front of people, present it to them in the way that you want them to see it and get reactions. And kind of gauge, are you get the reaction you want? If you have a horror monster and you're throwing that out and describing it to friends and peers and they're laughing, you're like, okay, well, maybe this isn't working out the way I want. I need to shift it around before I implement how I use this in a story. And sometimes there really is a fine line between humor and most other things. And sometimes I've watched some movies that are B range, and sometimes you wonder if they meant it to be funny or if it ended up being funny because it was done poorly, and it's hard to say sometimes. But focus on people's immersibility. Focus on giving them reasons to come back and to come back. 24-year fiction. Have that hook to lure people back in, get them to turn the page, get them to get the next installment, get them to come back to your next game session. It's about the hooks that draw people back in. Focus on the immersion, not on the facts.
The flora and the fauna of an area in the world you're never going to visit.
Exactly, especially you're never going to visit. Yeah, brainstorm. Brainstorm with other world builders. Go to the Undercroft, Facebook.com/groups/Undercroft. There's a bunch of world builders there. Throw out ideas, get feedback, but then pick something and go. Brainstorming is is that search for the truth. It's a search for inspiration. And sometimes people will have maybe even really good ideas, but they're not what you want. And you're like, yeah, that's cool, but it doesn't work for me. Oh, but this gives me an idea. Let me go this way. Sometimes you just need that thing to get your motion going forward again. So, like I said, yes, I'm still going to be using world building skills, and on this show we'll be talking about world building skills. I'm no longer going to call myself a world builder. I'm going to call myself. This is where I'm stuck. I don't know. I don't
one earlier that I liked. What was the term you said earlier?
The fictional setting artistan.
Not that one. That sounds a little pretentious.
That's really pretentious. BSer, fantasy BSer.
No, it wasn't that. It wasn't that low. Like it was. I don't know. There was another term you said. I might have to re-listen.
I don't know. Well, I'll probably put a thread up. It's like world build. People who are calling themselves world builders are losing their way, and maybe it's just anecdotal. I don't have science behind this, and I'm a world builder. I kind of take things and I shoot in a direction and I just kind of go with it. But it seems to me that at least a lot of world builders are getting stuck on these paths where they're so focused on the realism of every detail of their world that, they're missing the forest for the trees. And by the time they get the bark done on that first tree, they're well on their way to having the world done. So,
or could be.
So I'll probably be throwing a thread in the Undercroft. There'll be 3 questions if you join when you go. So that's really all I have here on this episode. We'll probably build something in a non-world builder way next time.
Yeah, we could. We're due for a build episode.
We're due for a build episode, I think. So
we're due for another campaign too.
We're due.
And I think this next one should be funny. I think it should be silly. I think we should have a little fun.
We'll do a Groundhog's Day where I get to kill you at the end of every episode.
That would be awesome. I would be so down for that. Okay. Seriously, that would be really fun.
We'll start brainstorming it.
Yeah, no, I love this idea because there's been multiple things that I've watched recently. Like Sarah and I started watching Russian Doll, which is a Groundhog's Day. It's a time loop series.
Oh, okay.
With one of the actresses from Orange is the New Black. And there was some other thing that we watched Happy Death Day, which is a horror slasher movie time loop. So she gets killed every so often.
It's trying to figure out how to not be killed by the slasher.
Exactly. And there's actually a sequel coming out if it's not already out. But yeah, no, I love that idea. That's great. I'm totally down.
Okay. All right. Well, we will brainstorm more on that one later. And for your world building task, look at your plans. The plans that you have for the things you're building out, right? And look at realistically, what kind of skills would a person need to achieve everything that you want to do? And if there's something that you're going through easily, don't worry about it. But it's those things that you're stuck on. Look at what you're looking for and go, what skill set, think about this like, you're trying to build a career, right? What skill set would I need to be able to build the architecture for that building? If I'm trying to build a realistic skyscraper, I don't have the science behind that, but I can map out a bunch of floors.
Well, okay, but are you encouraging them to?
No. What I'm saying is,
that sounds like the opposite of what we were just
I want you to think about those skills that you would need. And the way any good computer person would do is sit there and go, how can I simplify this path? It's like if I want to build a giant skyscraper, it doesn't matter if it would stand up in real life. Will it stand up fictionally?
That's
true. Build the levels and let it go. Understand that, there are maybe 4 walls to the skyscraper. And have the basic width and height, height and depth of the building. That there are going to be elevators going up and down, or a really long set of staircases. But beyond that, who cares if the walls are thick enough? Who cares what material it's made out of? Mm-hmm. As long as it's functional the way you want it to appear in the thing, you just roll with it.
The outer shell of the building is made out of wet spaghetti noodles.
It's magically bound by spaghetti.
Yes, it's magically bound with the wet spaghetti noodles.
Yeah. And then I want you to go for the real world task. Once again, to facebook.com/groups/Undercroft. I want you to go to the thread. I'm going to put out there saying, hey, what should I call myself? And I want you to go into that post and tell me exactly what I should call myself.
You might be asking for trouble on that one. Like, I don't know what you should call yourself. I know what I call you when you're not around.
Michael has a huge list that will be going into there. Yes. So I think we should have fun with that one. So I hope everyone has a wonderful week. And unless Michael has anything, we'll see you next time.
I'm good.
Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.garduel.com.
That's dul.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.